So I asked myself a question, which was, what could I have done to have made a lasting difference? And actually the answer was quite obvious. It was giving him the skills, training to support himself. Why could we not just crowdfund training for homeless people?
La, la, la. Hello everyone, and welcome to the EdTech podcast and this series episode of the VocTech podcast, Learning Continued, which seeks to explore the intersection of adult learning and tech. My name is Sophie Bailey and you are very welcome. A big shout out to Ufi Charitable Trust and Ufi Ventures for supporting this new series and vocational skills development in the UK. You can follow online at #VocTech and at Podcast EdTech on Twitter. This week we've got a bumper episode with 2 audio morsels for you to mull over. First up is Stephany, the CEO of Beam, who is talking about crowdfunding for social good and the importance of grit alongside training, education and support networks. Beam is the world's first crowdfunding platform that helps people from disadvantaged backgrounds to train up and get into rewarding work. Following my interview with Alex, we run the first of our upcoming features on further education. And this week, Hurd is in conversation with the head of school for creative industries at Coleg Cymoedd and visiting lecturer at the University of South Wales, Rory Meredith. Ian and Rory talk about VR for teacher observation, the Skills Priority Programme in Wales, and what it's like to attend the Singularity University Leadership Programme on exponential technologies. You'll also hear about why setting up a crazy department to incubate creative ideas might be one of the best ways to future-proof education. I hope you enjoy this episode, and if you'd like to be included in the next episode in our listener feature, just say hello, who you are and what you do in our 90-second voicemail platform at speakpipe.com/the EdTech podcast. Okay, here we go. Delighted to be here with Stephany, who is the CEO of Beam. And I'm not sure about where you are, Alex, but it's a glorious sunny day down here in the West Country.
I'm in London and it's a pretty glorious day up here as well, I'm pleased to say. But I'll be very happy to be in the West Country. That sounds lovely.
I think last time we met, it was up in London as well, and it was also a lovely day then, so we're doing well.
You're bringing the weather with you, so yeah, happy to speak anytime.
Exactly. So for those who don't know Beam or Alex personally, just a little intro. So it says on your LinkedIn page, I love to run and grow businesses by attracting and nurturing the most talented people and obsessing over product. In my last role as CEO of Just Park, I grew revenue over tenfold in 3 years, built a top-class team from 2 to over 40, raised funding from Index Ventures and closed the largest equity crowdfunding for a startup in history. I'm now working with a stellar team at Beam to solve the big and complex problem of homelessness. Beam is the world's first crowdfunding platform that helps people from disadvantaged backgrounds to train up and get into rewarding work. Our initial focus is supporting homeless adults in hostels and other temporary accommodation. It says here, I'm also the author of a business book on the sharing economy, the business of sharing. And you cut your professional teeth as a corporate lawyer at Clifford Chance, got a first from Oxford University in English and the fundamentals of financial analysis via a CFA qualification. And finally, you say that many people have kindly helped you over the years. So you're involved as a mentor with entrepreneurs through Techstars. And so You're on Twitter at Stephany. So welcome, Alex.
Thank you. It's very embarrassing hearing your LinkedIn profile read back to you, but thank you for embarrassing me.
It's kind of an exquisite type of awkwardness that I like to inflict on my guests.
Well, I appreciated it. Thank you.
So we start at the beginning. Where are you from, Alex, and where is the place you call home now?
So I'm from London. I've lived almost all my life in London, live now in North London, but I've lived in a few different places. So I lived in China after I left school, and that, I guess, was the first time that I saw kind of real extreme poverty. So that was almost 20 years ago, before this sort of huge period of growth, and that was quite an eye-opening experience. Next place I lived after that was Paris. I wanted to go learn French in this law firm, gave me kind of a bit of a sabbatical to go and learn French, which was very nice. And then I came back to London, and I had this experience of working with these sorts of very posh clients, being investment banks and private equity funds. But another thing I got to do when I was working in this law firm was to volunteer for a legal charity, which was totally the other end of the spectrum, because I was giving free legal advice to anyone in London that was interested. And at this legal charity, there were queues around the corner. Every legal clinic, and some of the people that we were seeing were in the most awful of life situations, and that was a very formative experience for me as well. I was living at the time in Acton in West London, and I was seeing all the extreme poverty and social deprivation and disadvantage that exists in London, which I always knew existed, but you're pretty insulated from when you are growing up. You're born in the country, you're living in a middle, grew up in a middle class sort of suburban type environment. These were often people who didn't even have the right to claim benefits, were hugely in debt, had health problems, had family who had been imprisoned or murdered in other countries, and it was just a whole nother order of challenge. So yeah, that's a little potted history on the places I lived.
That's interesting. I remember going travelling. I left school, and I remember a sort of similar situation. I was on a back of a sort of truck, and there was a kid opposite me who must have been about 8 or something. And this is in Laos, and I noticed that his head had kind of these bumps all over it, and obviously he was very unwell. And yeah, it's just kind of this realization as a young person that for him, he lived, probably miles and miles and miles away from a local hospital, let alone if you can access that. And it is a real awakening of, the types of problems that you've witnessed today are perhaps on the different end of the scale slightly. And it's kind of interesting that you mentioned, the people coming through that legal clinic, because I suppose that's part of it. It's sort of this catch-22 situation whereby, if you haven't got this one form, then it prevents you from accessing other opportunities. And you probably saw every different version of that.
I guess I began to understand that the two things that I've been lucky with were things that were very protective, and I think of them as scaffolding. And those two things are training and education, and all of the economic opportunity that's created for me. And the second thing is support networks in their various forms, whether that is family, friends, colleagues, all things that are immensely beneficial to you in all kinds of different ways, from professional prospects to just sort of general mental health and well-being. And probably come to this later, but for me, this very interesting model of crowdfunding to support disadvantaged people to get into jobs is that it actually provides both of those benefits at once. So you are crowdfunding for the training, which creates that economic opportunity, but you also give people support networks. And those support networks come from the people who fund the campaigns. And today, more than 200 people on average fund each person's campaign. And they form this amazing new support network for that individual. They send positive messages, they boost the confidence, they can also surface employment opportunities. And that's, I think, fundamentally why we think this model is so interesting. We think of it as kind of building scaffolding for people that is protective and will allow them to become more resilient and more independent.
I mean, I was looking at the comments around people on the Beam platform, and we will come to it in a minute. I want to delve into sort of your prior work just a bit before we do, but I can totally see that. You can see the encouragement and the, starting to follow someone's personal story, in the way that we do when we're invested in the kind of journeys that our friends and family are taking as well. But yeah, just before we dive into that, so I love Just Park, just on the record. So I went up to London recently for an event and got completely stung in overnight parking. Usual situation, you're pushed for time, just kind of wang your car somewhere, and the outcome isn't usually very good. So yeah, great work on that. And I suppose part of your role during your time at Just Park was, closing that record-breaking £3.7 million crowdfunding round. So can you tell us a little bit about what that was like? So going through that process, and also, how you think the sharing economy fits into the world of employment, vocational skills, the workplace. So how does the sharing economy fit into, what we might be able to achieve in education and training?
So the crowdfunding was incredibly nerve-wracking and scary and exciting. So we initially set out to raise £1 million and were very conscious that if we didn't raise that, it would be a very public failure to what was a reasonably well-known business. And it was my first kind of CEO role, and it would have been pretty professionally embarrassing as well as bad for the company. So, that was going through my mind. And what made that a much bigger fear was the fact that relatively shortly before we did the fundraise, we were told that we were not able to promote, or it would be risky to promote the fundraise as EIS or SEIS. So investors wouldn't get those huge tax benefits from investing. And subsequent to the raise, we found out that actually it was eligible, but we thought the prudent thing beforehand was to not tell investors that they would be getting EIS. And at that time it was, and I think it probably still is, like pretty unheard of to raise equity crowdfunding without SEIS or EIS. And I went and found the one person who had done a fundraising on crowdfunding, both with and without EIS. And I said, well, did you notice a difference? And he said to me, well, without EIS, it was 10 times as hard and we raised 1/10 as much. So that was the cause for real alarm there. But, in the end, it was fine. And we ended up, going almost 4 times over our original target. And the campaign had loads of momentum. And I think it really spoke to people. Everyone understands from their daily lives that parking is a really broken thing. And I think the business just then and now really continues to resonate with people who know that there's a kind of a big problem to be solved and the technology can really make a difference. And then your second question, Sophie, around kind of sharing economy and being, well, what I see the similarity is these kinds of collaborative platforms are often connecting people. So, Airbnb is connecting someone with a home with someone that wants to rent the home. Get Around is connecting someone wanting to rent out a car with someone who wants to rent that car. And for both people, there's benefits, and the tech platform does well when it can safely connect those two parties and solve both of their problems. Well, what Beam is doing is fundamentally connecting two groups of people as well. It's connecting people who really need help with people who really want to help. And it's that kind of one-to-one connection that I think makes Beam so special. When people donate, they get to follow the stories of the people that they are supporting, and they get email updates when the individual is doing their training, is starting work, and they can engage in those updates like they could with any social media post. They can like and they can comment, and they can really see the progression that an individual is making. So, I think that's where I see the sort of the similarity. It's kind of connecting two groups to make the experience, richer, more efficient, and kind of just more human.
And you mentioned your work previously with the pro bono legal work. How long has the idea for Beam sort of been there and been developing, and sort of how did that transition into sort of forming Beam as a formal charity and foundation?
So it took about a year between coming up with the idea and the platform launching. And over that period, we spent a lot of time kind of developing the models with some great charities, and with individual people experiencing homelessness as well, and obviously building the technology and the kind of platform itself. But the original idea stems from a meeting that I had with a homeless man at my local tube station, and this was a guy that I'd walked past loads and loads of times. But one time, fortunately, I plucked up the courage to speak to him, and we got to know each other. The first conversation I remember, he told me that he would sit there because there was CCTV, and that made it less likely that he would be attacked. And we got to know each other over the course of a few months. Nice guy, mid-40s, Irish man, kind of big beard. At one point, he disappeared for about 8 weeks. And when I saw him again, he looked completely different. His beard had gone, and he looked like maybe 10 or 15 years older. And I went up to him and I said, what's happened? Where have you been? And he said, had a heart attack. I've been in hospital. And I walked home that evening to my nice flat, and I just thought, well, nothing I've done has really made a material difference to this person's life. He's in a worse position now than he was when I first met him. So I asked myself a question, which was, what could I have done to have made a lasting difference? And actually the answer was quite obvious. It was giving him the skills, the training to support himself. And that was going to cost more than a coffee, but, what if we all chipped in? Why could we not just crowdfund training for homeless people that they could use to sustainably support themselves? And that was really the genesis of the idea. And I went round and spoke to charities, and some of them were interested, and we took it from there.
That's amazing. And I mean, from the training point of view, who do you connect with to provide that training, and how do you go about sort of aggregating that service as well?
So all of the training is provided by third-party training providers, and we pick the best one for the job. So we audit them before using any of the training providers, and then the homeless people who are getting trained there, they also review the training providers so that we get any feedback. And, it's not something that we ever wanted to do ourselves, because there's already a great ecosystem of people providing high quality professional training. So, it's all about tapping into that.
And I think I saw on your website that, you're looking for talent all the time in terms of people joining Beam, people with machine learning skills perhaps, and that kind of thing. What role does technology play currently, and how do you sort of see the service evolving?
So, there's two types of people that we're generally sort of looking to hire. So some of them are sort of people with startup experience, and other of them are people who have some experience working with these kinds of groups, or just really passionate about making a difference and joining a social enterprise. So, there are people doing technical roles, but actually the bigger need right now is for people who are just really passionate about what we're doing, who are interested in operational roles or business development roles or partnerships roles. So check out the jobs page. If anyone is listening who is excited by what we're doing, just drop us an email on careers@beam.org.
I was reading the learner journeys, and they're pretty amazing. And you almost feel nervous reading the ones where, their fundraising is yet to complete. So sort of how long does the duration of fundraising tend to take? And, I suppose what happens if people don't meet their target? Is there any way that we can kind of help sort of boost that?
Sure. So there is a page on our website, which is beam.org/transparency, which has more than 50 live data points on all kinds of different things. So the number of people training in work, different types of donations, how much money is being donated, all these sorts of things. One of the data points that it gives is the average length of a campaign in terms of how long it takes to fund. I think I'm correct in saying last time I looked, it was about 34 days. So that's kind of how long the average campaign takes to fund. Now, we are a very unusual type of crowdfunding platform. On the average crowdfunding platform, you have lots of campaigns that fail to fund. And they kind of like that because it's kind of a bit Darwinian, and they want only the good things to fund is the sort of reality. They don't care if your idea is not good enough to fund. Like, that's just the people, have declined it sort of thing. Yeah. Whereas we obviously care, and we don't want anyone to not fund. So we have a totally different approach. We bring people onto the platform in a really gradual fashion. And what that means is that we wait until the current campaigns are funded before bringing on new people. So people get funded, but the more money that we can get through the platform, the more people we can get onto the platform. Mm-hmm. And at the moment, the service is so popular, and actually a lot of the people who are using it are referring other people to Beam as well, that, I would encourage anyone listening to this to go to beam.org and set up a monthly donation for £1 or £2 a month or something, as much as you feel you can spare. Be an incredibly enriching experience for you. And then the more people we have who are supporting the campaigns, the more people we can move through the model, the shorter the waiting list, the more people we can help. So, that's one of our biggest challenges at the moment is just continuing to grow the people that we can help, where the blocker is the donations. And
in terms of the kind of training that people have chosen so far, I sort of noticed, construction worker or hairdresser or PA. I just wondered, if training providers are listening in and they have courses that they think would provide additional opportunities. Would you like to hear from them? Because I was just sort of thinking of, with the white hat model and apprenticeships and sort of going down the digital training path as well, whether there'll be a kind of diversity of how, like what and how people are learning as well.
So, yeah, interested in speaking to training providers, but most interested in speaking to employers. Mm-hmm. So all of the career paths are shown on each campaign. You can see these are people becoming accountants or crane riggers or lorry drivers or all kinds of awesome things that we need as a society. Yeah. And if your company is hiring these sorts of people, definitely get in touch. The people coming through the model, they're highly trained. They're getting the best training that they can have. It's accredited training. They are leaving the B model, confident, motivated, really, really keen to get on and start earning money. And anyone who can offer some opportunities to these individuals, I think, will be, doing a great service to the individuals, to their society, but I think also for their companies as well, because these are people who have, remarkable stories to tell, who've overcome a lot with their lives, and I think who will add a lot to the diversity and strength of any workforce.
What are you reading at the moment and why?
I'm reading a book called Grit, which is about how grit is the kind of key determinant in success of people professionally. I think I've got quite a lot of grit already, but it's interesting reading a book on it in any case. So that's the thing I'm reading right now.
And that's interesting. You mentioned grit, so I'm kind of interested in How to Fail podcast at the moment, which I think is fantastic. Have there been any experiences which have developed that grit, especially, do you think, in your own life?
I think there have been a few periods in my life when I've been out of work and I've felt how destabilizing it is and how demoralizing it is, and practically how difficult it can be to not have the structure in your life and the salary coming in and all of these things. And I remember thinking, wow, I'm struggling to get the job that I want and I'm not in work despite all of the incredible advantages I have. And what must things be like for someone that, maybe they're in their 60s and they haven't been in work in a long time and they, don't have a university degree and, all of the many things that, I'm lucky enough to have. And so I think being out of work probably kind of developed some grittiness in me because I felt the challenges of having to kind of prove yourself. And the period I was out of work was during the credit crunch when, it was really, good opportunities were really thin on the ground, frankly. Mm-hmm. And it was a very tough market in which to find a good job. I think these sort of downturns probably develop grit. For people who have left university in the last few years, all they've really known is, certainly if they're come out of a decent university and are trying to get a job in London, it's like a very buoyant jobs market, especially within the tech sector. And it is actually quite character forming to have to fight a little bit more for some great opportunities that companies are providing to people. And that's very much been the experience of people in some especially Southern European economies that have still are in pretty bad shape up from the credit crunch. The young people there really probably do have a level of grittiness that you see less commonly, I would say, as a crude generalization.
It makes me chuckle because my friend and I were having a chat about, and we're sort of on the tail end of millennials anyway, so we're allowed to say this, but that's kind of like the opposite perhaps of when some people that would fall under the millennial tag was kind of straight in the door, already want a kind of pay rise and haven't perhaps gone through that grittiness of having to fight. So, perhaps that is a symptom of a kind of buoyant jobs market as well. But cool. Okay. So if people want to find out more, they can go to the Beam website. And what's kind of next for Beam? What's the next sort of 6 months look like?
So we want to grow the team a lot. So as I mentioned, looking for kind of frontline people to work with the Beam members and support them through the training into work. I would frankly love to be doing this job myself because it is incredibly uplifting, inspiring thing to be able to follow each of these individuals on their journeys. So we need to hire people to do that role and business development people. We need to fundraise, obviously. We need to do more corporate partnerships. We have some incredibly exciting partnerships with some kind of household name companies that will be coming soon. We're also launching a new and improved version of the website. So those are some of the things that we have to look forward to. We're also building out a new feature which is called fundraisers, which allows people to raise money for Beam by doing, a cake sale or a marathon or any kind of thing. It's, they start a kind of Just Giving style campaign on Beam. And then the really nice thing about this is that as people donate, the actual people who are receiving those funds begin to appear on the fundraising page, and you can see how they progress from within this fundraising campaign. So, that's a really cool thing we're really excited about, because a lot of people are excited about Beam, and I think it's a really nice feature that will empower them to go and, help us to help more people.
Fantastic. And will you be going beyond London at some point, do you hope?
Absolutely. I mean, hopefully beyond the UK at some point, but it's a question of doing it at the right time and in a way that, really sort of supplements the work we're doing in London rather than distracts us from it.
Fantastic. Well, Alex, thank you so much for today, and good luck with everything.
Thank you so much, Sophie. It's been lovely speaking.
I think we're on. Excellent. I'm here with Rory Meredith at Coleg Cymoedd, just outside of Cardiff. Coleg Cymoedd is a fairly new college.
Well, we merged in 2012 with another further education college. Yeah, so we used to be Coleg Morgannwg, and that encompassed a few campuses. And then we merged with another large college, Mynach College, and it became Coleg Cymoedd back in 2012.
So it's a fairly new college, and obviously you've had quite a lot of investment, because we spoke a little bit yesterday about, your use of VR to improve practices in teaching and learning. I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit for me. It sounded really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, with the development of teaching and learning practice, really, amongst our members of staff, when I sort of moved into a management position 2 years ago, I was sort of trying to bring with me the tools that I had used as a lecturer and trying to see or adapt them to how could they possibly be used to improve teaching practice amongst my colleagues and people that I work with in the department. The thinking really behind that was the college is investigating a number of different methods of trying to improve teaching and learning in general. And this was something that I proposed. This was a project I'd like to undertake. To use 360 cameras that we already had purchased. We were using the Candor QCam cameras, which we bought off Kickstarter. The assistant principal for teaching and learning here gave me the go-ahead to run with that project for a year. So we started it last September. And literally, we just poured our efforts into what other equipment do we need. We invested in some HTC Vive Pro goggles, and literally we've spent the last year. So it is very much in a early experimental development phase. We've ended the first year of doing it. We've encountered a number of technical problems and issues that we had to overcome. The actual 360 capture inside the classroom, the purpose really that we were going for was to try and allow a member of staff to do a learning observation on themselves, where they would become a learner in the classroom and then be able to view their own teaching back and assess it themselves. So in other words, do a learning observation on themselves in order that they could self-reflect and then hopefully improve, think of strategies to develop their own teaching practice. It would allow them to form their own opinions based on those observations. The great thing about, capturing it in a 360 manner rather than a regular sticking an iPad in a classroom or whatever is that immersive experience and trying to really engage them in the space, allow them to look all the way around the room at every learner in the space. And as I would if I was doing a learning observation on them, and I'm generally looking at the learners mostly when I'm doing a learning observation on a member of staff. So I thought it'd be really great for those to have that experience. Personally, as a manager, I've learned more about teaching, viewing some of my colleagues than I ever did when I was teaching on my own, in my own little room, without any interaction with anybody else. You're sort of in charge of your own space and you deliver teaching in the way you think is best. But when you go on and view other people, suddenly they do things totally differently to you. And sometimes you can think, wow, I never really ever thought of approaching a lesson in that way. It's a really amazing technology. And I think we're on the cusp of it, really. It's been, I guess, quite a deceptive technology for a while. But as it becomes more, maybe with 5G and, it'll become easy to sort of transfer these things onto mobile devices. And I don't know where it's going to go, but I just want to be a part of that.
So you've done some experimentation. Have you been able to measure the impact of that? How are you thinking of measuring the impact?
The place we're at right now is we've captured 15 videos. The capture process is relatively straightforward. The post-production process is a little bit more arduous than I first thought. Generally, though, those are processes that 5 minutes and let it run, so they're not really that, they sound like a burden. But it's something that I'm quite happy to just take that on myself and process it, let it run, leave the computer on overnight or whatever, come back the next day, upload it to YouTube. We then hit a technical issue whereby EduRoam, unbeknownst to me, that the HTC Vive Pro needs the Steam client to work. Our firewall basically at the college was blocking access to Steam, and we had to work with the IT department, which delayed the reflective process really for members of staff to actually view these videos. We're only now in a process where the firewall is cleared as of yesterday, and now we can actually get to the thing of members of staff viewing the videos. But I've got the library of videos, so I've done kind of the hard work. Now it's for the members of staff now to go in and view. So we're at that stage now. So it's kind of going to roll into next academic year, the self-reflective part of it. But I'm happy with where we're at because that hurdle has now been, jumped over or crossed, so to speak.
Yeah, and I guess it's all part of just the experimentation stage, isn't it? And finding ways for these things to work. But it definitely sounds like it's something that could be really interesting. There's lots of, sort of rich data, and the way that you can immerse yourself in that situation, it gives a more fine-grained and a more immersive approach to peer feedback, where it becomes more than just words, which is great. So that sounds amazing, actually. I think a lot of people are going to be really interested in hearing that. Do you have anything coming up on the horizon? Any new developments? Any more crazy ideas?
Well, those actually, I'm very lucky in that, parts of our crazy ideas, we always try to tap into money that floats around in the pots from, whether it be from Europe or ESF funding. So we've been lucky in our department whereby we've really proactively gone after some of these pots of money for training and CPD. It's actually called the Skills Priority Programs here in Wales, and lots of colleges can tap into these funds, but we've been really proactive in our school, in the creative school here. Part of that enabled me to go to Silicon Valley to do the Singularity University Executive Program at an incredible cost, which I would never have had that opportunity to go there. I mean, I'm incredibly interested in exponential technologies, and the executive program itself is for senior lead. I mean, I felt completely, probably the lowest paid person there. I was sitting with the governor of the Danish National Bank, director of Netflix for South America, directors of Microsoft and Google, and basically 100 senior executives from every business sphere, where they basically go on this executive program, which is a 6-day program. All these, basically the best 24 TEDx style talks you've ever seen, with people with brains the size of planets, come in and actually discuss how exponential technologies are affecting every industry. So everybody's kind of got a vested interest in that. Coming from the music industry, I'm obviously completely aware of the disruption that went on in the music industry. It's kind of how I lost my first career. So I've always been interested in digital disruption and how that affects industries. So I managed to secure the funding to go, spent all this time there. Again, there were people talking about the future of learning, future of mobility, future of banking, blockchain, microbiome, things I'd never even heard about. One of the things that came out of that particular thing was I came back to the college, did a presentation to the principal and to the college management team here, and it's that thing about being able to think in a creative and crazy way. And is there a crazy department where you work? So I came back really saying that I want to start a crazy department where we can have time to think and come up with innovative ideas to solve problems that we're experiencing, And so that's something that I'm looking forward as a project and moving forward, is to assemble a crazy team inside the college and try and come up with ways.
That sounds great. I'd like to be in that crazy team.
It doesn't. Brilliant. We're all. If you're a creative person, you're halfway crazy anyway.
Well, that's probably true. But that sounds really interesting. So, what was the terminology you used for that?
Like in digital disruption. So you're talking about how
that's what the event was about.
Well, it kind of is. In a way, coming from the music industry, obviously when music became digitized, the entire industry really didn't know what was going on. So they're talking about trying to give senior leaders in organizations to become more exponential in the way they think rather than linear, and making forecasts based on what's happened in the past, because generally your forecasts fall short. But of course, that's happened to media industry, telecoms industry, the banking industry, education in particular. And I worry about that. Being in education now, I worry about how the digitization of knowledge and how those things are going to affect educational institutions, really, and that entire model could fall apart.
What was the name of the event?
It was Singularity University.
The Singularity University.
Yeah. It's based in Silicon Valley in the NASA Research Center. It's run by Peter Diamandis and Ray Kurzweil. They're the founders. In 2008, they founded this. They formed this university really to sort of provide leaders of organizations and companies and corporations trying to future-proof their own industries. The program's fantastic. It's the best training I've ever had in my life, and it's just one of those cause experiences where, you come back, and if you don't try and embrace these technologies or try and find a way that you can use them to the benefit of your team or to the benefit of yourself, then to me that is a waste of time. It is trying to leverage these things and to put them to a positive use, to make your life easier and to make the learning experience better. And
tech for good.
It is tech for good.
Tech for good is the phrase. Yes, absolutely.
We should end on tech for good.
Let's finish there on tech for good. That's the best way to finish any technology conversation, I think. Well, thank you very much for taking the time. I know obviously time is a massive resource issue in education these days, so I very much appreciate this time that you've made for me. And hopefully your ideas will save people even more time and drive up standards in amazing ways that you can hopefully share with us again sometime.
Who knows? We can only try. Thank you very much, Ian.
Thank you so much.
That's all for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening in, and I do hope you enjoyed and found some gems of inspiration to take away with you. Don't forget that for events you might be interested in around the world, you can go to theedtechpodcast.com/events. That's all for now. Thanks for subscribing and listening. Bye bye.